Hello, this is Mrs. Taylor, and I'm going to show you how to solve this equation by completing the square. Now, this equation in particular, looking at it, I probably could solve by using the X puzzle. But we are learning to complete the square because we are eventually going to have to put equations in vertex form, and you need to know how to complete the square in order to do that. So we are going to practice with this trinomial. So to start with, the first thing we do is we group our squared term and our linear term, the term with just the x, together. And for the moment, we are going to ignore the plus 8 and the 0, and we are going to complete the square using just the two grouped terms. And so the way I complete the square, we learned several methods. The box method I showed you with the algebra tiles, but the shortest method is just to divide the b value by 2 and square it. So 6 divided by 2 is 3, and then 3 squared is 9. So that is the number that I must use to complete the square for this binomial in the parentheses. Now, I cannot change the value of my expression, so whatever I add, I also have to subtract. So what we do is we subtract that same value here to the right of the 8. And now what I'm going to do is two things in one step. I'm going to combine the 8 minus 9 because those are like terms and I can combine those together. But I'm also going to rewrite this trinomial that I just completed the square for as a binomial squared. So what that means is binomial means two terms. So it would be x plus or minus something in parentheses all squared. Now, we learned a shortcut, but if you forgot it, you can always do the X puzzle for what's in the parentheses to get your binomial. But the shortcut is just to take the b value and divide by 2. It works because you completed the square. So this factored would be x plus 3 all squared, and then 8 minus 9 is minus 1. Now what we do is we're going to solve this equation. And so we're going to use addition and subtraction, multiplication, division to isolate the binomial squared, which means we have this minus 1 here. I need to move it to the other side so that I can then apply the square root property. So I'm going to add the 1 to both sides. Remember, when you're solving equations, you do the opposite operations. And then once I've isolated that binomial squared, I could take the square root of both sides. And when I take the square root of both sides, what happens on the left is the square root of a binomial squared of any number squared. The two operations cancel because they're opposites, they're inverses. So what that simplifies to is just x plus 3. And on the right, we have to remember one little detail. Remember, when we take the square root of a number, when you first learn square roots, you only learn the positive answer because you haven't learned about negatives yet. And so they don't really throw that at you. However, now that you are in Algebra 2, you have to consider the fact that the square root of 1 is 1, but the square root of 1 is also negative 1, because remember, square root means which two numbers, when a number's multiplied by itself, would equal that radicand, that number inside the square root. And so 1 times 1 is 1, but negative 1 times negative 1 is also 1. So what we do is we write plus minus 1 to show that it could equal positive 1 or negative 1. And to finish solving, of course, I need to isolate the x. Well, I have two cases. I have where x plus 3 equals positive 1 and x plus 3 equals negative 1. So I'm going to write out those two cases and then solve each one separately. And what you have, once you do that, is two solutions. X equals negative 2 and x equals negative 4. Now, what you need to do at that point is check your answer. So what you would do is you would take your x value and you'd plug it into your original equation to solve. And the way you would do that is you would use parentheses. So wherever you saw an x, you would plug in parentheses negative 2. So, for example, if I was checking with negative 2, it would look like that. And if I was checking the negative 4, it would look like this. And then I could just plug it in my calculator, parentheses all, to check it. And if I did that at this moment, I would get 0 for both of those. So I know that those are my solutions. And so that's how you would solve an equation by completing the square.